Project Winter, Stalin's frozen experiments in 1953, deep inside a Soviet laboratory, a 23-year-old woman was strapped to a metal table and slowly frozen alive. But that wasn't the most horrifying part, because what I'm about to reveal will make you question everything you thought you knew about human experimentation. The woman on that table wasn't the only one, and she wasn't meant to die. She was meant to be brought back and again. By the end of this story, you'll understand why historians tried to bury this chapter of Soviet history for 70 years. You'll discover 3 shocking truths. First, the secret human hibernation experiments that Stalin himself approved. Second, how Soviet scientists learned to preserve human bodies for decades while keeping them technically alive. And third, the identity of one woman who survived 17 freeze-thaw cycles and lived to tell about it. If you think you can handle one of the darkest chapters in Soviet medical history, stay with me, because this story only gets darker the deeper you go. Her name was Anna Kozlova, and what the Soviets did to her changed the course of medical science forever. But before we talk about Anna, you need to understand the man who made it all possible. Joseph Stalin was obsessed with one thing above all else: conquering death itself. While the rest of the world was rebuilding after World War II, Stalin poured millions of rubles into a classified research initiative so secret that even most high-ranking party members didn't know it existed. He called it Project Winter, and its goal was nothing short of human immortality. But here's the truth no one tells you about Stalin's final years. He wasn't just paranoid about his enemies, he was terrified of his own mortality. At 70, he could feel his power slipping with every heartbeat. So he did what any dictator intoxicated with control would do. He ordered his scientists to find a way to freeze time itself. Far away in the Siberian wilderness, in a facility so isolated it didn't appear on any map, Soviet researchers began what would become the most horrifying medical experiments in history. They weren't trying to kill their subjects. They were trying to preserve them, to place human beings in a state between life and death, where they could be stored like books on a shelf, waiting to be read again. The implications were staggering. Imagine an army that could be frozen through winter and revived for spring battles. Imagine scientists who could work for decades without aging. Imagine a leader who could rule forever. This isn't science fiction. Every detail comes from declassified KGB files released in 1991, medical journals that researchers risked their lives to smuggle out, and audio recordings that were meant to be destroyed 40 years ago. And here's why this still matters today. Those barbaric experiments didn't end with Stalin's death. The techniques created in that frozen hell would go on to influence everything from space exploration to modern cryonics, the science that promises to freeze people after death in hopes of future revival. But it all began with a list. According to those declassified documents, Soviet scientists didn't randomly select their victims. They followed precise criteria. Women aged 18 to 30, prisoners serving sentences longer than 15 years, and, most importantly, subjects with no living relatives who might ask questions. Dr. Mikhail Vulov, the lead researcher on Project Winter, wrote chillingly in his private journal, "We require specimens who exist in complete social isolation, dead to the world but not yet dead to science." They called them Ice Maidens, a name as poetic as it was cruel. The selection process lasted 6 months. Guards would pull women from their cells in the dead of night, march them to examination rooms, and subject them to hours of tests. Blood samples, psychological profiling, detailed measurements of bone density and muscle mass. But here's what makes it truly twisted. These women thought they were being chosen for early release programs. Officials told them they were volunteering for advanced medical treatments that would reduce their sentences. Some even thanked their captors. Imagine being 22 years old, locked away for a crime you may or may not have committed, then being told there's a way out, a way to serve your country and win your freedom. Wouldn't you take that chance? 3 women were ultimately selected. Maria Petrov, 19, imprisoned for theft. Katina Volga, 24, convicted of anti-Soviet propaganda. And Anna Kozlova, 23, sentenced for desertion, though her military records were mysteriously sealed. The first 2 women died during their initial freeze cycle. Their bodies couldn't handle the trauma of cellular crystallization. Dr. Vulov described their deaths with cold precision. Subjects 1 and 2 experienced catastrophic organ failure during revival. Cellular damage too extensive for meaningful recovery. But Anna Kozlova was different, and that difference would trap her in a nightmare that lasted 8 years. Because what the Soviets discovered in her body, and in her blood, would change everything they thought they knew about life. Death and the space between. Between life and death, the freezing process lasted exactly 72 hours. No anesthesia, no pain relief, only the slow mechanical descent into a living death. Dr. Vulov's leaked medical journals described it in chilling, step-by-step detail, every hour, every degree. For the first 6 hours, Anna remained conscious as her body temperature dropped from 98.6 degrees to 85 degrees. Her teeth shattered from relentless shivering. Her lips split open as her skin stiffened, veins turning to pale, frozen rivers beneath the surface. Vulov wrote, "Speech becomes slurred at 90 degrees. Consciousness fades at 85 degrees. This is when the real work begins." But no one warned Anna about what came next, because when the human body senses its own death, it fights back. Her pulse spiked to 180 beats per minute. Her breath came in short, broken bursts. Then her skin began to turn, blue, gray, and finally a translucent white, as if the soul itself had fled. The Soviets injected her with a chemical mixture they called Compound Zero, a secret cocktail of antifreeze compounds, blood thinners, and experimental cryoprotectants designed to prevent ice crystals from forming inside vital organs. The formula remains classified to this day. At hour 24, Anna's body temperature reached 60 degrees. Her heartbeat slowed to just 20 beats per minute. Brain activity dropped to near zero. Yet somehow, impossibly, she was still alive. Vulov's notes described this state in almost reverent language. The subject enters biological suspension, neither living nor dead, but something between. A human being preserved like a butterfly in amber. The next 48 hours were critical. Technicians hovered around the frozen body, monitoring every flicker of data. Too fast and the shock of cold would destroy her organs. Too slow, and her brain would die from oxygen deprivation. Finally, her core temperature stabilized at 35 degrees, just 3 degrees above freezing. Her metabolism slowed to 5% of normal function. Her breathing stopped entirely, replaced by artificial respiration. For all practical purposes, Anna Kozlova was dead, but death in Stalin's laboratory was only the beginning. When the revival began, even the scientists couldn't look away. First came the slow rewarming process. Warm saline was pumped into her veins drop by drop, while electromagnetic currents pulsed through her chest to restart circulation. Her body twitched violently, once, twice, then went still. Then her eyes shot open. Anna woke up screaming, every nerve. Every cell in her body remembered what it felt like to die, and to be pulled back from the void. Soviet researchers recorded every revival session on magnetic tape. Those audio files were smuggled out of Russia in 1987. To this day, no one who's heard them forgets the sound. The sound of a human being clawing their way back from death, again and again. After her third cycle, Vulov wrote, "Subject displays extreme psychological distress upon revival, retains fragmented memories of the suspension state, claims to have experienced dreams of ice and voices in the cold." But here's what the Soviets didn't expect. Anna didn't weaken after each cycle. She grew stronger, her heart rate normalized faster, her muscle reflexes improved. Her brain scans lit up with increased neural activity, especially in areas linked to memory and sensory processing. After her fifth revival, doctors discovered her bone density had increased by 23%. Her muscle mass grew despite being immobile for weeks. It was as if the freezing wasn't killing her. It was transforming her. Dr. Anna Kozlova, the psychiatrist assigned to evaluate her, noted, "Subject demonstrates unprecedented psychological resilience. No trauma evident despite repeated near-death experiences. Instead, she appears to anticipate and even welcome the process." By her 10th revival, Anna began helping the scientists. She advised Vulov on adjusting Compound Zero's formula, suggesting changes that improved survival rates in later subjects. She even corrected a calibration error in the temperature control system that had killed previous test cases. Vulov wrote privately, "She understands the process better than we do. Sometimes I wonder who is really conducting these experiments, us or her." But the most disturbing development came in the 15th cycle. During reanimation, while her brainwaves were supposedly dormant, Anna began to speak. Her voice was faint, distorted by the rebreather. But the words were unmistakable. "I can see them. The others. They're still here, still waiting." At first, the researchers thought it was delirium, residual neural activity, meaningless noise. But every time she was frozen, she came back with new fragments of memory from the void. Dreams of faces trapped in the ice, whispering through the darkness. Dreams of rooms that never thawed. Anna wasn't just surviving the freezing process. She was conscious during it. For weeks at a time, she existed between life and death, fully aware but unable to move, speak, or scream, and yet, each time she returned she was sharper, more composed. Almost superhuman, her eyes lost their human warmth. Her speech became cold, precise. Even Vulov, the man who had created her nightmare realm, began to fear her. In his final surviving journal entry, he confessed, "I believe she is evolving. Perhaps she no longer belongs entirely to us, or to life itself. But what the Soviets discovered next would rewrite everything they thought. They knew about her, and about the true purpose of Project Winter, because Anna Kozlova wasn't who they thought she was, and the truth about her bloodline would change everything. The awakening beneath the ice." For years, the Soviet Union kept Anna Kozlova hidden beneath the Siberian permafrost, in a sealed facility known only as Sector 13. Officially, it didn't exist. Unofficially, it was where the impossible lived. By 1952, Anna had survived more than 20 freeze-thaw cycles. No other test subject had made it past 3. The others, men, women, soldiers, had turned to brittle statues under the frost. But Anna endured, her mind and body adapting to every descent into death. Dr. Vulov began to suspect what none of them dared say aloud. Anna wasn't human in the way they understood humanity. Through genetic testing, they discovered a mutation, a rare unidentified strand embedded deep within her DNA. The same anomaly had appeared in only one other known individual, her grandmother, a woman who'd been executed in 1918 for alleged witchcraft and immortality rituals. But when Soviet archivists traced the family lineage further, they found something even stranger. Anna's bloodline predated modern Russia, stretching back to the 17th century Romanov court, and beyond that, to a secret order of healers whispered about in Eastern folklore. The scientists called it the cryon gene, a sequence that allowed biological preservation beyond natural limits. In other words, Anna had been born to survive the cold. At first, the military saw her as a weapon. Imagine it. Soldiers who could be frozen, shipped across continents, and revived on command. Armies that never aged. Leaders that never died. But Anna had other plans. After her 23rd revival, the facility experienced a sudden power surge. The temperature control systems failed. For 6 minutes, every chamber in Sector 13 lost power. When the lights came back on, 6 technicians were dead. Their bodies showed no wounds, only a thin layer of frost covering their faces. The cameras recorded nothing, except for a flicker of movement near Anna's containment unit. Her glass chamber had cracked. From the inside, Vulov's final report, written days before his disappearance, stated, "She no longer requires our machines. She has learned to control the cold." Witnesses described her walking through the corridors barefoot, frost forming beneath her feet with each step. Metal rails froze solid as she passed. One guard swore her eyes were no longer blue, but pale silver, glowing faintly like moonlight on snow. Then she vanished. When Soviet agents raided the complex hours later, they found nothing but silence, and a thin film of ice spreading across every surface. The project was buried, its records sealed by the KGB. Vulov was declared dead, but decades later, fragments of his notes surfaced, smuggled through East Germany, eventually landing in the hands of a British historian named Dr. Evelyn Merrick. She described her discovery in an interview from 1989. The pages were frozen. Together. Literally, I had to warm them with my hands to read them. The handwriting stopped mid-sentence, as if he was interrupted, or taken. The last words written by Dr. Vulov were only 4. She is still alive. And maybe he was right. Because after the fall of the Soviet Union, strange reports began surfacing in the Siberian wilderness. Sightings of a woman who never aged, wandering near abandoned research sites. Hunters found animal carcasses perfectly preserved in ice despite no snow for miles. Thermal cameras captured faint human silhouettes glowing cold instead of heat. One photograph, declassified in 1993, shows a figure standing among the ruins of Sector 13. Her face blurred, her outline rimmed in frost. On the wall behind her, a single phrase scrawled in Russian, "I remember the ice." To this day, scientists debate whether the Soviet cryogenic experiments were real, or propaganda designed to terrify the West during the Cold War. But in 2017, a new anomaly was detected in the permafrost near Lake Baikal. A pulse of energy, 20 degrees below absolute zero, measured by 3 independent satellites. Investigators sent drones to the location. They found no structure, no radiation, only a perfectly circular patch of frozen ground, shaped like a human figure. Locals call it the sleeping woman. They say when the cold wind howls across the valley, you can hear a woman's voice whispering in Russian, repeating the same words over and over. Not again. Please, not again. Whether Anna Kozlova was a victim, a survivor, or something far beyond human, no one knows. All we have are the fragments of a story buried beneath layers of secrecy, frost, and time. But one thing remains certain. The Soviets were not searching for immortality. They found it, and it looked back at them, and if she truly survived, she's still out there, waiting beneath the ice.